HorrorDeconstruction.
What's up, everybody? It's the HorrorDeconstruction. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, but most likely on YouTube. Give us a like, share it, subscribe. Hit that thumbs up icon. Hit that subscribe button. Hit that whatever you need to hit to let people know you like us. With your host, Comp, for this solo deconstruction. Today's film is Fear Street, 1978. Shadyside, 1978. School's out for summer and the activities at Camp Nightwing are about to begin. But when another Shadysider is possessed with the urge to kill, the fun in the sun becomes gruesome light for survival. Directed by Lee Yaniak, written by Zach Olkowicz and Lee Yaniak, with a story by Phil Graziadei, based on the novels by R.L. Stine, starring Sadie Sink, Emily Rudd, and Ryan Simpkins. So this is the second of the Fear Street trilogy that has been debuting every Friday on Netflix. And I gotta say, they're doing a good job there. And so this one is going backward in time. Obviously, the first one took place in 1994, and 1994 or 1996, I don't know, one of those two. And it had an interesting, very surprisingly entertaining film. Felt like a 90s film. I did say that it relied heavily on I'm sure, a massive budget for the soundtrack, and it does do that here, but it does not follow that same sort of every 5 seconds a new song, or maybe it didn't, maybe because I was aware of the music in the 90s version. This one I wasn't aware, but it's a good soundtrack nonetheless. It was interesting to hear some tunes that I'm not familiar with much 70s music, besides probably obviously the hits, but it didn't feel as pervasive as the first film. Not that it's necessarily a bad thing to hear music that I like, but it kind of felt like it was saying, hey, listen to this, remember this? Hey, listen to that, remember that? Which is not like the worst thing to do for a film. Like if that's the worst aspect of the first film, then it's not really that bad. But it didn't have that same issue in this one. So in this one, we start out where the second film ends off. So we're not going to spoil this film, but it might have light spoilers for the first one. So obviously you might as well just see the first movie, and then we're not going to spoil the 1978 for this one. But then it begins where the last one ended off with three surviving characters from 1994 getting into the home of Seaberman, played by Gillian Jacobs. You might remember her from the series. What the hell is that show called? It used to be an NBC series that was supposed to be. All I know is it had Guido Sarducci or Childish Gambino, whatever the guy's name is, and Community. That's the show that she was on with another alum who was also on a great Netflix series that got canceled, which was about wrestling. Can't get into that right now. Anyway, so the kids from the previous film, one of them being possessed by the witch, Sarah Fear, or some sort of aspect of her, they bring her to Seaberman's house, and Seaberman, who was the survivor of one of the massacres, well, obviously the 1978 edition of these crimes that the witch has been pulling on Shadysiders, and they try to find some history on how they can stop this, because the main character from the original, from 1994, is trying to save her girlfriend, and we are led through a story told by Steve Berman about her experience with similar sort of insanity that happened to Camp Nightshade, which is a camp that was dealing with the Shadysiders and the Sunnyvale people. If you don't know, Sunnyvale is, I guess, the cream of the cream type of neighborhood. Nothing bad happens there. No crime happens for like 30 years. And then the shady side is the one where it's constantly harassed and possessed by killers and maniacs. And why people would live there, who knows? But apparently you can't leave the town for some reason. Although one of the characters' fathers ditched the whole family, which led them to have a horrible life. So I guess some people couldn't leave. Obviously, the guy got smart and got the fuck out, even though he did leave his kids. He probably should have just taken everybody, but I guess he had a young girl to go with. So, how does this stack up to the 1994 film? I think it's actually, in some aspects, much better. Not by much, but I think it actually is a better film in the fact that it's closer to a slasher film than the original was. Like, I would say the original one is obviously a playoff of an R-rated version of the Goosebumps movies that had Jack Black in it, where it was sort of all the monsters attacking the town, sort of like if you enjoyed the Monster Squad stuff like that. So this one is much closer to a Friday the 13th film, although with some caveats. Although it does have a good amount of body count, it's a lot of it is not too graphic. But when it is graphic, it is pretty graphic, but it's done like with digital effects, which is kind of jarring. But nonetheless, there are dead bodies here. There are surprisingly sex scenes. I didn't think they were gonna have sex scenes in here. And there's the return of the male buttocks, which Netflix loves. So there's nudity here also, mostly guys. Not that it's like pervasive, but yeah. So it does have the 70s aspects out because I didn't think they were gonna have sex in this. Although they had gore and cursing in the first one. Since it was more appropriate with the kids, I guess. They didn't want to show sex, but there was like a sex scene, but the girls looked like way too young, even though they played by 20-year-olds. And in this one, there's like sex scenes happening, and I thought that was like, okay, at least this is like a real movie. And the movie, and it's shot, it looks like a film, and even sort of the generic horror soundtrack, besides the classic 70s music, sounds like every sort of stock appropriate horror soundtrack that you would hear in this type of film, and it works with it really well. There's a great scene towards the end when the cast of monsters are returning. There's this girl who's killed 8 of her friends in the 50s, I believe, or the 60s. Her name was Ruby, and she comes back. She's singing the song "You'll Always Hurt the Ones That You Love," and it's great because it was just a small aesthetics choice. But there's a scene where the main characters are running away from the killers, and she's singing that song. The Ruby character is singing that song while the sort of orchestral, generic slasher music is playing, and it works really well, and it really made it haunting. It was really cool. So let's get with the main characters. So Sadie Sink is playing Ziggy Berman. So the way that the movie starts out, we have Jillian Jacobs as C. Berman telling the story about how her sister died on 1978, and this is how she, connects her to the main characters of the 1994 films, saying how she dealt with the curse of the witch. And so we're dealing with the sisters Ziggy Berman and Cindy Berman, played by Emily Rudd. It's an interesting dynamic that leads to a nice twist at the final of the movie. But Sadie Sink is really good in this. If you know Sadie Sink, she was one of the newer characters that appeared, I believe, in season 2 or season 3. No, season 3 of Stranger Things. She's like the little redhead girl that had the asshole brother that got possessed. She's very good in this. It's a little bit more of an adult role for her, even though Stranger Things sort of teeters between adult. Stranger Things is for adults, like that show is for adults, but it has enough room for kids to watch it, like 12-year-olds and up. And she's really good in this, playing more of an adult role. Like she's not given super adult things to do in this film, just in like anything graphically violent. She does do violent stuff, but I think she really plays it off really well. And Emily Rudd is really good as Cindy Berman, as this sort of young, this older teenager. Let's say she's probably 16 or 17, who is trying to shake off, whatever sort of negative aspect she has on her being a shady sider, because she has to. She's essentially changed her whole life because she's a shady sider, and she's trying to get in and have a better life because of her father leaving, or her family and stuff like that. So these sisters have gone through a lot, and so Ziggy has kind of leaned into the shady siders way of life, where people just accept their fate, that everything's cursed, and Cindy is trying to really push that shit down, which you can't blame her. Like, why you want to break a cycle of having just shitty stuff happen to you just because of where you come from. And so I understand her character as well, and she's dating McCabe Sly, who plays Tommy Slater, who's this nice guy. He's a good character. And there's also Alice, played by Ryan Simpkins, who's this sort of punker girl with a short hair, and she's playing an appropriate shady sider burnout. But later on in the film, there's actual sort of nuance and character development where they explain, these people are explaining why they live the way they live, and I wasn't expecting that in this type of film. And I thought it was interesting that aspect of the film was, prevalent. Like, it was important to show that. It happens about 2 or 3 times, and, there are parts where you're like, oh, seconds into it, you're like, come on, get with it. It doesn't become that level of annoying. Like, it's not like, to compare it to another film like Army of the Dead has scenes where it feels like Zack Snyder just crowbarred the fucking scenes into the movie, which is like really like, what the hell am I watching here? Get to the zombies with that movie. And that happens here where it'll take, they're trying to commit to making these characters realistic and have them being nuanced and feel human. So it feels like they handled it much better here than they did in Zack Snyder's movie. But I appreciated that they did that. Like, it didn't feel like just cannon fodder characters, the movie. Like, they actually felt, no, the characters that you thought were dickheads actually turned out to be something more than that. Which is, strangely enough, like, to follow the 1994 film, it seems that the curse really is against Shadysiders. Like, anybody from Shadysiders is like fair game for the killers. They don't really care about the Sunnyvale residents. And it kind of sucks because the Sunnyvale residents are full of like complete assholes, and you don't got to worry about them in the movie because it seems like nothing will happen to those characters. So they act like assholes throughout the whole movie. So you're left with massive blue balls deal with those characters. So you don't have to worry. Like, that's a spoiler, I guess, but you don't have to worry about them. Nothing happens to those fucking characters. It seems like only the Shadysiders are the ones who are cursed. So the Shadyside is cursed because what the original people did to Sarah Fear. And I think that the gore effects are pretty good, but they're sort of obscured in this version of the film because it's pretty dark, since it takes place mostly at night. All the other film also did that, but it was a little bit more clear with the gore and the violence. And this one is kind of obscured. I didn't like much of the digital effects of gore. Like, I like the after effects of the heads being caved in, but like there's somebody who gets their head smashed in with an axe, and it's obviously clearly digital. Like, I don't know why they can't figure out that lighting effect yet, but people are getting chopped up and left and right, and a lot of it is off screen, which is kind of like, if they committed to it in the first one, you just keep it with this one, because there's no death that's as graphic as what happens to one character in the first film in this one. Which has to deal with like a meat grinder or some sort of processing thing they did, which was like the major kill in that one. And this one doesn't really have that. It has a nice decapitation effect. There's disgusting latrine. I hate latrine stuff that happens in movies when people are like in outhouses and to deal with shit. Horrible. I hate that crap. But I do think that they did a great job all around with this film, and I think that it's a strong sequel that's better than the first. I wish there was more kill counts, but I think because it's like actually like 12-year-olds or 14-year-olds that are getting hacked into pieces, that's why they decided not to show it. Which is pretty ballsy for this type of movie. I was actually interested in. I wanted to see a film based on the Ruby character, the one who ended up killing her friends, because her mother plays a role in this one. But I don't know if we'll fully see that, but her character does make an appearance in this one also. They do point out to many different characters, like the milkman who killed all the women. I was sort of confused at who the hell he was, because like his character pops up and I was like, oh, I didn't remember. But then now thinking about it, I was like, oh yeah, that guy. There's that little kid who killed his whole family, who looks like a miniature version of Leslie Vernon, if you've ever heard of that slasher mockumentary movie. I think that what works for this one, obviously, is the setting. I guess it will be nostalgic to people from the 70s. Good music in it. The music wasn't as overused as in the first film, which is not a horrible thing for the first film. The main characters are believable. Nick Good, who was the sheriff in the first film, shows up in this one when he's younger. He becomes a primary character, and we see his role and why he warned C. Berman in the beginning. Like I said, there's a really interesting twist that works in this film. I think the whole Sarah Fear stuff and there's some sort of cavernous area that's underneath the whole shady side. I'm sorry, I guess this is Shadyside, where this camp is at, because this is why all this stuff is happening. That's cool. I think there was obviously a cult in the first movie, so I don't know when those people pop in. I assume they'll be in the final film. I'm not too much on certain period dramas. Like, I was never really interested in sort of witch period dramas, but I think the way that they handled these first two films will make the last one interesting. And I'm thinking that I can only guess that maybe it's going to be a half and half type of film because we see that, I don't want to spoil it, but there's definitely going to be a story completely based on what happened to Sarah Fear in 1666, and I'm looking forward to it. I think it's going to be an interesting film that, like this one, I think this one is a solid entry, and I believe the people from American Horror Story can learn from this set of this trilogy of making an interesting horror show. Because American Horror, and I feel bad like comparing American Horror Story, which sometimes has ups and downs, but they did an entire series based on like a 1970s slasher film like this one, and this one kind of got everything right, although it didn't have the right amount of body count, and they keep the story nice and clean as opposed to going crazy with the plot points in American Horror Story. Either way, I think this is worth watching. Certainly a little bit better than the first film, which is a rare feat sometimes with slasher movies. And then so we'll see what happens in the third film, which looks really interesting. So I would give this a 7.5 out of 10. Getting high on drugs when it's actually just Tylenol. And with that, this has been the Horror Deconstruction.